Yo, what is going on, everybody? Welcome to the show. An impromptu one, not on our normal time, but we've got a special episode today. Today, we are running the numbers. What does that mean? We're going to be auditing the supply of Bitcoin. And a number of you may have seen the tutorial that I dropped near the beginning of the week last week about downloading Bitcoin Core, letting it sync up, and then running a command to audit the supply of Bitcoin. And so if some of you are in the audience here that have prepped and done that, then of course, follow along with us. I've got Pierre Rochard waiting in the wings. TC is also joining us on this episode too. But before we run the numbers, we're going to chat just a little bit about what makes Bitcoin different, why running nodes are important, all that kind of stuff, just to get us kind of primed. It's not going to be a super long episode, but if you can, please do smash that like button. It would be greatly appreciated and will help others learn how to audit the supply of Bitcoin as well and encourage others to run nodes. But let's kick this thing off. I am Ben with the BTC Sessions. This is your daily session.
HODL the Bitcoin.
All right, let's bring in our guests here. I want to welcome to the stage Pierre Rochard and TC. Gentlemen, how you doing?
Well, how are you, Ben?
I'm good. I'm excited to run the numbers. Thanks for doing this. And TC, how are you?
I'm great. Thanks for having me. Sorry if my voice is a little muffled. Trying out the new mask.
That's well, I mean, you look good. You look good, man. I think better than I've ever seen you. Well, gentlemen, we are here indeed to run the numbers and audit Bitcoin supply. And there's going to be a number of people in the chat as well that have watched a tutorial that I made last week on exactly what we're doing with Bitcoin Core specifically. But some people may be running other implementations like Umbrel or Start9 or whatever. You can do this with them as well. And I'll give a little peek into how to do that. But I wanted to kick off initially. We will run the numbers momentarily here, but I wanted to kick off initially, which is a little bit of a chat. And Pierre, I'm going to queue you up with a few questions in and around what sets Bitcoin apart from everything else, because with presidential shitcoins and such, there's a lot of confusion right now for a lot of newcomers kind of trying to navigate this whole space. And so maybe what I'll start with is, can you maybe just give newcomers a primer on the mechanism through which Bitcoin is distributed out the gate?
Yeah, absolutely. Happy to. So I think that first off, we live in a world of narratives, right? So when people talk about Bitcoin being digital gold, some might think that's just a meme. And it is a meme, but it's not just a meme in the sense that it is based on actual software engineering fundamentals. And so that's where I think Bitcoin really stands out, is that its memetics are downstream of sound software engineering. And so, first of all of the Bitcoin that are on the ledger got onto the ledger through proof of work mining. The only exception is the Genesis block, which is 50 Bitcoin, and that's unspendable just in the code itself. So it's just, it's irrelevant, but it served as a anchor for the time chain that built on top of it. So what mining is, what proof of work is a competitive permissionless process to get Bitcoin onto the ledger out of what is called the get block subsidy function, which we can get into the specific mechanics of how that is calculated. But basically the idea, which Satoshi Nakamoto wrote about in his white paper, is to have something similar to gold mining, where there is a cost attached to bringing the Bitcoin onto the ledger. And that has both economic and moral implications. On the economic level, it makes sure that there's not some kind of centralized entity that is deciding how the Bitcoin get distributed. And so contrast that with something like Ethereum, where 70% of the ETH on day zero were distributed through a centralized process, which was their auction mechanism, which, there's lots of people who ask questions about how legit that auction was and whatnot. So that's a non-factor in Bitcoin. All of the Bitcoin got there through an economic process of competition. And from a moral perspective, it's really important because it means that nobody earned seigniorage. So what seigniorage is the monopoly profits from issuing a currency in a centralized manner. By being decentralized, by being competitive, Bitcoin mining is a tough industry. And so nobody's earning extraordinary profits by having a monopoly on Bitcoin mining. It's quite the opposite. It's actually pretty thin margins, and businesses go out of business trying to mine Bitcoin unprofitably. So that, that's at a high level. We can get into the technical details, but I'll pause here.
Yeah, yeah. I also wanted to, in the same vein, in and around proof of work versus proof of stake, can you maybe just contrast and compare how proof of work stands up in the face of something like proof of stake? Because the common narrative is, oh, Bitcoin uses so much energy, it's wasteful. Why don't we just go to proof of stake, which doesn't require so much energy?
Sure. Yeah. So proof of stake fundamentally can't do what proof of work does with regards to the issuance of the asset. And the reason is quite simple. It's because you've got the nothing at stake problem, which is that in order to have proof of stake, the asset already has to exist. So it's a catch-22 because you got to stake the asset. So that's one. And then when we look at where is the energy cost going? So about 98% of it goes towards new issuance, right? So the revenue that Bitcoin miners get is from the subsidy. It's the new Bitcoin being added to the ledger. 2% of it is from transaction fees. And that's really what the rest of Satoshi's white paper was about, was how do you have a decentralized clock that is going to be able to sequentially order transactions over time so that nobody double spends the same Bitcoin twice? And that is also something that proof of stake cannot do. And the reason why they can't do that is because the signers, the equivalent of the hashers in the Bitcoin system, the signers in the proof of stake system, they can create parallel universes. They can create lots of different chains and then reveal them in a way that is going to favor them and essentially defraud the system. So the way that proof of stake systems prevent that from happening is with checkpointing by the developers. And so essentially, proof of stake is a proof of authority system where you have a centralized cabal of individuals who are going to decide, what is the correct time chain because it's not anchored in any kind of outside physical reality.
Nice, I like that. TC, I want you to be able to chime in here too. Do you have any thoughts on topics at hand?
Oh, so many. I like the way that that Pierre put it. I feel like there's a really special thing about Bitcoin as far as the UTXO model and the sequence of blocks updating this state of where all the Bitcoin is, allowing every user in the world to be able to verify what they own and where all the other Bitcoin is. I feel like this is like the key thing that makes Bitcoin act as a source of truth, which makes it truly unique and totally in contrast to proof of stake, as Pierre was describing. You can't actually assert truth without all of this work needing to be proved and the fairness that comes out of establishing a requirement like that.
Like that. Now, I want to also tie in the idea of, I guess, censorship resistance and transaction finality with mining as well. So I'm going to kind of show a website here. It's called howmanyconfs.com. And what this shows is how many confirmations are equivalent to 6 Bitcoin confirmations, or Bitcoin being kind of the ability to most certainly know, as the highest degree of certainty that you can know that your transaction is difficult to be reversed or cannot be reversed. Right now, 6 confirmations, about an hour to get the same degree of certainty that your transaction will not be reversed as an hour worth of time passing on the Bitcoin blockchain. These are other proof of work coins, and how efficient they are at transactional certainty or immutability. And so, funny enough, Dogecoin is in second, but it's 12 times slower. Actually, sorry, Litecoin is in second, 11 times slower. A Dogecoin is 12 times slower. Bitcoin Cash is 331 times slower. Monero 248, Ethereum Classic 32, Zcash 609 dash 1200 plus. So what we're getting at here is, even if something is proof of work, it doesn't mean that it's in the same realm as Bitcoin. And so I just wanted, Pierre, if you wanted to jump into a little bit about, you know, Bitcoin as a mechanism of making it prohibitively expensive for reversing transactions. Maybe if you wanted to touch on that.
Yeah, I think that that's it's a bit of a red herring in the sense that um, basically we're conflating two things. One is the revenue that Bitcoin miners get from the subsidy, and the other is the transaction fees. And so my view is that the only thing that gives a transaction finality is transaction fees, because the miners earn the subsidy whether they include that transaction or not. And so I'm not like super enthusiastic about that perspective. The other part of it too that I think is kind of nonsensical is that, like, some of these other chains, they have mechanisms by which the developers can force a hard fork. So to talk about how much proof of work it has, it's like, who cares? It doesn't even matter. It's still controlled by the developers. And so, it's, I'll put it this way. Like, if you look at it in the limit of, let's say all the Bitcoin are mined, and so there's no subsidy anymore. There's no censorship happening. There's no congestion. So transaction fees are basically almost zero. It's only profitable for one guy in his parents' basement to mine on his laptop, and he's securing, $500 trillion of Bitcoin. Totally fine. Because if he messes around and he decides to, mess with the time chain and start removing transactions or whatever, then magically transaction fees go up because transactors want finality and they will pay for it. And then magically, other people start mining because they're attracted by those transaction fees to get those transactions included in blocks. And so I really think that the whole narrative around the quote unquote security budget was one that was fabricated by S-coiners and academics who fundamentally don't understand the fact that Bitcoin does not need a standing army, right? Like, we don't need to pay trillions of dollars to have that chart that you just showed. The reason why we need to have that expense is purely because Satoshi decided to have the subsidy function be the way it is. He could have further front loaded the subsidy function and gotten all the Bitcoin out 5 years ago, and we'd have a lot less mining today, maybe less mining the Dogecoin. And guess what? Bitcoin would still be number one. It would still be completely secure. You'd still have transaction finality. And so I think that we have to be careful about, like, looking at these heuristics and not thinking about it from a game theory perspective.
TC, do you want to chime in?
Yeah, I mean, security budget FUD is some of my favorite to laugh at. I feel like you're always going to have someone on planet Earth who has energy that costs them less than the value that they receive from the mining. And as long as that's the case, there's no such thing as a security budget problem. And I think that goes well into the future, including long after the subsidy goes down enough to be sort of insignificant relative to fees. I think you're always going to have someone on Earth who has access to cheap enough energy where it makes plenty of economic sense to go out and mine. And certainly, I think you're going to see entities on Earth that have so much Bitcoin that they are incentivized to continue mining anyways, just to maybe give themselves some preference in regards to transactions getting confirmed. There's lots of other motivations that keep people engaged in mining activity long term.
And at the end of the day, the difficulty can adjust downwards, right? Like that's not an issue. The other part that is nonsensical is that they always look at it as like, what if somebody tried to brute force this head on? Which is like the most expensive way to do it. It's far less expensive to just do a 0-day cyber attack and like hijack some, Bitcoin mining farms or seize them, right? Just send the military. That'll cost you like, hundreds of thousands of dollars, not billions of dollars. And so I think that whole conversation completely misses the point that this is about preventing seigniorage. It's not about transaction finality.
Awesome. All right. So let's then dive into the topic at hand here, which is using a Bitcoin node to verify the supply of Bitcoin. Pierre, do you want to just touch on what somebody is doing when they're running a node, why they might want to run a Bitcoin node?
Yeah, so we talk about not your keys, not your Bitcoin, and that holding your own Bitcoin keys allows you to be your own bank. Running your own node allows you to be your own central bank because you are a peer. That is, that you're a equal on the peer-to-peer network of Bitcoin, and that you are verifying blocks that are being proposed by Bitcoin miners. And if that block is invalid in the sense that it's violating the protocol rules that are set out in the code that is in your node software, then you will reject that block as invalid, and you won't update, your balance sheet, the UTXO set. And so we've seen this happen in practice. It's not just like some kind of hand wavy theory. There was a mining pool that had a bug in their software where they included the transaction fees in their total mining reward, but they forgot to include the transactions. And so it looked like they were trying to create Bitcoin, even though that was not their intention. They were just incompetent. And so the rest of the network verified that block and discovered this error and rejected that block as invalid. And so when you're running a Bitcoin node, you don't have to trust somebody else to do that for you. You just do it yourself. And that allows you to not just verify that your transactions are being included in a block, you're also verifying that all of the transactions, if you add up their value, are not exceeding the total supply, which is a part of, we could call the social contract of Bitcoin, like the rule of never getting above 21 million. And then, of course, kind of the issuance schedule that comes with that. So when you're running a node and your node is adding the Bitcoin, the new subsidy to your UTXO set on your computer, you're doing that, like you're the admin, you're the central bank from your perspective. Now, other people, yeah, they're doing whatever they're doing. But nevertheless, that's where, that's what makes Bitcoin decentralized. And in particular, what makes Bitcoin decentralized is that you have the option to do that. You don't even, I'd argue, it's not even that you have to be doing it in order for Bitcoin to be decentralized. It's that you have the real option to do that, and that the cost of it is not so expensive that you have to be Google or Amazon Web Services to stand up a Bitcoin node.
TC, do you want to chime in regarding people running their own nodes?
Yeah, I used to think it was something you could think of as sort of optional. And these days, I think of it as something that anyone who self-custodies ought to be doing. I think everything Pierre said is valid, but I want to add the idea that anytime you're interacting with a node, there's opportunities to have a privacy leak. And one of the reasons that I started running a node several years ago is I realized, hey, I'm checking my wallet balance 7 times a day, and every single time that request is going through somebody else's node. I didn't like that privacy leak. And so you can just enhance the privacy aspect of your sovereignty by running your own node and not making any requests to any third parties anytime you're even doing something as innocent as just checking a balance or checking the status of a transaction.
Awesome. Awesome. Well, gentlemen, I think it's time. I think we're going to run the numbers as coined by Pierre here. And I'll share my screen, but if you guys want to on your own screen, when I say go, we'll go ahead and run some numbers. So I've just got mempool pulled up here just so we see if a block randomly comes through right as we hit the command and we end up auditing different blocks. But basically, I've got Bitcoin Core up here. I've also got an Umbrel node here, and I've SSH'd into a Start9 Embassy here. So I've got a few different mechanisms to do it. I did some testing. The Umbrel and the Start9, because they're kind of communicating remotely in my local network, they do take a tad longer than Bitcoin Core does. That's running directly on this computer, but I'll at least show the commands so people can see. But if you followed along with the tutorial earlier in the week, all you're going to do with Bitcoin Core up and running, you're going to go ahead and click on Window and go to Console. And you're going to get this little pop-up here with an option, and maybe I'll shrink that down actually, with an option to type commands down at the bottom. And in there is going to be this command. I'm going to paste it. I'm not going to run it yet. Oops, wrong one. My bad. I'm not going to run it yet, but I'll paste that into the chat here as well. So if you are running Bitcoin Core, that is now in the chat. On an Umbrel, if you are running an Umbrel, I'll just show you really quick. Shout out to Ed from Bitcoin Mentor who showed me how to easily get into this. I hadn't done it before, but you're going to go down to the bottom, click on Settings. You're going to scroll down. There is, where is it? Advanced Settings down at the bottom there. And then there's Terminal here, which you can click Open. And then you select the app you want to do it on, your Bitcoin node, and you get a terminal window here. And there is a command here that I will paste in. It's slightly different than the one that I'm going to run on Bitcoin Core. Pasting that into the chat now, and I'll paste it into my terminal here. And then SSH'd into my Start9, I have a slightly different command. There's something familiar with all of them though, which is gettxoutsetinfo is the crux of the command here. So TC, Pierre, are you guys ready to run this command here?
Can you just tell me the name of the command again?
Yes, it is get, gettx out, O-U-T, S-E-T, info, I-N-F-O, get tx outset info. And I guess I'll just do a, well, I'm cutting it close here. It's 9 minutes ago that a block came. So we'll see if we end up auditing the same block together. Okay. You guys ready? I'll do a 3, 2, 1. All right. Everybody that's watching, 3, 2, 1. Run your command. It's executing. I'm going to do the same thing over on my Start9. I'm going to do the same thing over on the Umbrel. And we'll see if a block comes in. So in the meantime, Pierre, do you want to describe what Bitcoin Core is actually doing right now? Get TX outset info.
Yeah. So every node has all of the unspent Bitcoin outputs, which is basically the balance sheet for the whole Bitcoin monetary system. It's this, and so what the software is doing is that it's going over every output and it's adding them all up. Now, there's millions of these outputs. In fact, let me see here. There's like 180 million of them. And so that's why it takes a few seconds to process all of them and add them up. Now, I also have a SQL database that mirrors it, and that takes a fraction of a second to do it on the SQL database. But regardless, this command is one of three parts of auditing the supply of a ledger. The first part is actually doing the issuance schedule. So the issuance schedule, if you look in the source code of Bitcoin, there's the get block subsidy function that performs a right shift binary operation on a constant that is essentially set in the configuration that Satoshi set to be 50 Bitcoin. And that does it by how many halvings have occurred. And so by doing that, and you can know what is the new issuance supposed to be for that block height based on how many halvings have occurred. And so then you add all of that up, and that's really kind of in an ideal world, this is how many Bitcoin would be in the UTXO set. Now, we don't live in an ideal world, and so some of the Bitcoin, which is, it's 220 Bitcoin, are actually completely unspendable from a software perspective. And so you subtract that out, and that's what gets you to the number that you see on the command. So it's from an accounting perspective, what you're doing is you're reconciling new issuance with current user balances. And you can do this at every height of Bitcoin's history to make sure that it nets out to zero. Otherwise, you've got a reconciliation error. And you need to look into that. Now, I've run the numbers on that. It is zero at every height. It's something that, from a software engineering perspective, is actually impossible, from what I've heard, to do for Ethereum. And the reason why that is that identifying, so first of all, instead of having a UTXO model like Bitcoin has, they have an account model. And so it's actually very computationally intensive to add up the supply of ETH. Second, they have all sorts of different situations where ETH gets destroyed. Now, maybe there's also situations where ETH gets created, but if you're not auditing the ledger, you're not really sure how it all nets out, and if you have any creates that might be offsetting some destroys. So I challenged them to perform this three-part ledger reconciliation many years ago. Some of them tried starting to do it, and they gave up on it, and they moved on to sharding or whatever they do in Ethereum land, dancing on stage in furry costumes. And so, I think it highlights the contrast in terms of the quality of the software engineering. Bitcoin has superior software engineering. All right, don't let the S-coiners try to argue otherwise. What they did is that they tried to differentiate in order to, add more features, be at the cutting edge, or just do it differently for the sake of doing it differently, for the sake of marketing, right? Because they got to market a world computer. And it's not like they've actually come up with some kind of superior ledger technology in any sense of the term.
I have seen all three of these, by the way, come through. So we've got up top, you're going to see the block height. Which block are you actually auditing the supply on? So 882316. Then, Pierre, am I correct in saying that TXouts, this is the number of outputs that are currently on the ledger? Is that correct? Okay, so that's the number of
Correct.
UTXO.
Does that only include the spendable outputs?
Yeah.
That should only include the spendables, because the total amount also only includes
and
the
so
spendables.
if you look down here at total amount, we can see there are currently 19,819,519 Bitcoin, 0.96883181 Satoshis. So
That's crazy. I got the exact same number.
yes, ditto.
Wild.
And same with
here.
my Start9, same number. Same with my Umbrel, same number. And in the chat, please let us know if you also got the same number. But we were able to do this in completely different time zones, parts of the world, different machines, all simultaneously auditing Bitcoin, not just to a ballpark number, but down to the single Satoshi. And Pierre, can you quickly reiterate? You might, given that the block subsidy right now is 3.125 Bitcoin, we might expect to see a number that is only 3 decimal places long. But can you just reiterate how some of these coins can be lost by miners through mistakes?
Yeah, absolutely. So there's a number of different ways to lose Bitcoin and to essentially destroy them. And Fabian Jar put together a really great article on it. I'll send you the link. But one of the ways is for when a Bitcoin miner is creating a block, for them to not include the full reward that they are entitled to in the Coinbase transaction, which is the transaction that is rewarding the Bitcoin miner that they create. So that's one way. There's other ways as well. And then eventually, so I mean, there's a difference between Bitcoin that are technically unspendable. So, you've got op return, for example, that makes it unspendable. And then there's in a more loose sense, Bitcoin that are unspendable in the sense that the private key has been destroyed. But that is not factored in here because there's no way for us to know if the private key is actually destroyed. And so this is really looking at it from a software perspective of what do we know is unspendable. It's not looking at it from kind of a social perspective of, well, what are some Bitcoin that might have been lost because the private keys.
And this is an article that you wrote. Where are the coins? And it, I imagine, talks about exactly.
Fabian wrote it. Yeah, he's a Bitcoin core developer who was a trailblazer on this, and so I tip my hat to him. He's done some great work.
Awesome. I will share this in the chat as well for everybody. And I guess we'll start rounding it out here. But everybody that went through and did this, thank you guys for being here. I see everybody in the chat saying they got the same number, and these people are people all around the world able to do this simultaneously with us. If you're watching this and you just didn't have a node synced up yet, and so you couldn't do it with us, you can absolutely do this on your own later. I'd like to do this once a year. If you guys would be game to come back, maybe this time next year and do a quick run of the numbers. Maybe we'll get a few extra people joining us. That'd be a lot of fun. But you don't even have to own Bitcoin to audit the supply. So even the naysayers that don't want to touch a single sat, they can still audit the supply of Bitcoin themselves. So TC, I'll give you any final words you want to chime in, and then Pierre the same, and then we'll sign off.
Yeah, this is just awesome. And it was so cool to see all the comments of people everywhere watching this and getting the same result. This is the epitome of don't trust, verify. This is the source of truth that Bitcoin is. And anyone in the world, as Pierre said before, has the potential to download and run a node with very little expense and very little effort and verify all these things themselves. And they should do that. I think Bitcoiners should do it. I think anyone who's skeptical of Bitcoin should do it. And it's just truly amazing. It's that simple. Run one command and you've just literally audited an entire monetary system. Go take that and shove it, Fed.
We'll see if we could get JPAL on the next edition of running the numbers. But Pierre, any final thoughts here?
Yeah, I'm sure Jeremy Powell's looking at his Excel spreadsheet right now saying, hey, I can do that too. So Bitcoin's engineered to be the most reliable monetary system in the world. And it's something that you don't have to trust me. You don't have to trust Ben or TC to say it. You can actually just go, you can even go download the source code, read through the source code, compile it, then run the Bitcoin node. And you'll really know what's going on under the hood. There's no magic behind it. Jamie Dimon, in an interview, he said, well, how do we know that Satoshi Nakamoto is not going to pop out of the on screen and just like create 1 trillion Bitcoin? Well, we know that because of what we just did, right? That we can be self-sovereign. We can run our own node. We can audit the supply. And we can also, it's not just about auditing the historical supply. If you look at how the software is written, you also know, hey, in the future, here's how many Bitcoin there's going to be. You don't have to have any doubts about it. And then all the people who say that, oh, well, when all the Bitcoin are mined, are you going to have enough transaction fees? Yes, of course we are, right? It's like saying, hey, like in any kind of market, if there's not high enough transaction fees and people are double spending Bitcoin, transaction fees will go up. Okay, that's just supply and demand. And so all that FUD is nonsensical. And Bitcoin is forever going to be the soundest monetary system.
I love it. Well, I will wrap it there. Everybody in the chat, please do hit that like button. Give this a share for any naysayers that may not understand how somebody can audit Bitcoin supply, or that a group of people from around the globe can simultaneously come to the smallest unit of precision in auditing a full supply of an entire monetary base. Pierre, TC, thank you guys so much for being here. And I guess I'll see you guys for the next one. Cheers, guys.
Thank you.
Talk to you later. All right. And everybody that came, thank you guys so much. Again, please do smash that like button, share this out. And I will be seeing you guys later this week. Of course, check out the most recent tutorials, including the one with exactly how to do this on your own Bitcoin Core node on your computer. You don't need any special hardware or anything. And tune in this week, Thursday for the news and Friday for Why Are We Bullish. Until then, I'll see you guys next time. Keep stacking sats, keep stacking skills. I'm Ben with the BTC Sessions. This was your daily session.
HODL the Bitcoin.